There is a major issue with the exterior of these cars that we need to talk about.
I often get accused of being a big Lexus fanboy, but I tell you what, they really dropped the ball with this car. I mean, why didn't they bring the V8 to Australia? Bloody jerks.
So you might be thinking, geez, that looks a lot like a Lexus IS500. How the hell did ReDriven get their hands on one of those? Because that car was never released in Australia. We'll get to that shortly, but look, while our test car for this video is the IS500, in this video we're going to be focusing on the entire Lexus IS range, or at least the post-2020 models. That means we're going to let you know if we think you should buy one or not by exploring all the important details, like what they're like to live with and what can go wrong with them. And being a Lexus, you might think, well, they have an incomparable reputation for build quality and reliability, so surely nothing goes wrong with these, right? Unfortunately, that's not actually the case. For example, and look, this first one, it might vary depending on how you drive and where you live, but plenty of IS owners across the entire range have complained that the inner side of the front tyre can wear prematurely. Now, this is commonly thought to be an issue with the lower control arm bushes. See, they tend to deflect under heavy cornering and braking, and this can adjust the toe angle of the car, and that accelerates tyre wear. And look, if you're a more conservative driver, you might not have a problem with this, but if you're someone that enjoys spirited driving, some owners are going through a set of fronts in 15,000 Ks. But look, the good news here is it's really easy to fix. You can either fit a set of aftermarket bushes or maybe the bushes off an RCF. They're made of a more robust material. Now, before we go on with more exterior issues with this thing, I need to explain the reason that we're focusing on the post-2020 models is that we've already made a full feature video of the third generation Lexus IS. The link for that video is down below. But with the 2020 model, this was an update, and it was a pretty substantial one at that. See, in Australia, the 3 model range remained available in a couple of trim specs, not to mention a few enhancement packs as well, but the exterior design was overhauled, all models featured more tech and features, and the calibrations for everything from the ride and handling to the steering, even the NVH levels, were all improved. But most importantly, at least for a handful of countries out there, the IS500 was introduced to the range, which brings us to how we even got our hands on this thing. See, the V8 IS was initially available purely in North America from 2021, whereas Japan had to wait until mid-2022. And thanks to Lexus Australia not officially bringing the IS500 to Australia, this then allows it to be imported via our grey import schemes. And this is why you will start seeing these rare beasts on Aussie roads. However, even though this actual car is for sale at Lexus Chatswood here in Sydney, being a grey import means it maybe has some extra considerations before buying it, but we're going to delve into that shortly. Plus, the IS500 itself maybe isn't without its faults. See, owners of early examples in the US complained that the front bar here could drop down a little bit, so this panel gap ended up being a different gap from here to here. Now, Lexus did seem to fix this up on later examples, and according to the owners stateside, most of the dealerships did fix it. And interestingly, when we're doing the research for this, we couldn't find any reports of this problem happening on Japanese examples. But something that we found really amusing was that this panel gap issue was so tiny that we feel plenty of other manufacturers would just regard it as being acceptable. Basically, it seems that Lexus owners are so used to such incredibly tight tolerances that a panel gap that the likes of Tesla and Mercedes and Range Rover would be really proud of on a Lexus becomes an issue. Now, another complaint from the North American IS500 owners was that considering the price of the car and the position of it in the market, it was missing a few little pieces of accoutrement for the exterior. For example, in the US, no power folding mirrors, but on the Japanese ones, they do have them. So this one has them. Although, for our North American viewers, just consider this to be one less electronic thing that could go wrong with the exterior. Although in saying that, when we did the research on this, we really struggled to find any complaints about exterior electrical gremlins, which is almost the polar opposite to many of its European counterparts. However, unfortunately, there is one major issue with the exterior of this thing. We'll get to that shortly. First of all, how much do you need to budget for to get behind the wheel? Well, kicking off with the Australian market, at the bottom end of the spectrum, so we're looking at a, say, 2020 IS300 luxury, around about 50,000 bucks. At the other end of the spectrum, so a mint condition IS350 F Sport, around about $80,000. And this means that compared to their competition, like the BMW 3 Series, Mercedes-Benz C-Class and Audi A4, the Lexus destroys them when it comes to depreciation. In some cases, when comparing equivalent models and condition, you could be $20,000 or even $30,000 better off when it comes time to sell the Lexus. In fact, about the only other car in this category that can even nearly match the Lexus in terms of retaining value is the Genesis G70. And if you watch our full review video of that car, it's also maybe the only car in this class that seems to be able to match the Lexus for build quality and reliability too. But what about examples packing this stonking great V8? Well, here in Australia, these things are currently swapping hands from anywhere from about $115,000 to $130,000. But this does raise a really interesting point, and it's something that you really, really need to wrap your head around if you're in the market for one. The previous V8 Lexus IS, the ISF, was targeted directly at the likes of the E90 BMW M3, the W204 AMG C63, and Audi's B7 RS4. And it does make sense to assume that the IS500 would have the current crop of high-end European muscle in its sights. But it doesn't. A 2021 M3 retailed here for over $165,000, an AMG 63 over $175,000. But if the IS500 had been sold new in Australia, the price would have been more like $110,000. That puts it head to head against the likes of the BMW M340i and the AMG C43. And this means, just like its more conservative IS sibling, these things destroy the competition when it comes to residuals. Compared to the IS500, an equivalent year and condition M340i will ask anywhere from $45,000 to $90,000, or a C43 AMG currently ranges from $50,000 to $95,000. And as I just said, IS500s, $115,000 to $130,000. Unfortunately, that does mean that bargains are pretty much impossible to find, but it's also an example of history repeating itself, because the ISF, well, it was substantially cheaper than its European rivals when new, but these days it's more expensive. The same can be said for the GSF. And this, I think, is continuing the trend. However, we do really need to talk about the elephant in the room here, and it's the fact that these are a grey import. And we understand that does concern many of you, but honestly, it doesn't need to. Not only does the IS500 share the vast majority of its components with locally delivered cars, so getting spares really shouldn't be too much of an issue, once you watch our import buyer's guide video, it will explain that the right imported car can be a really safe bet. And it also shows you everything you're going to need to know before diving in. Also, just on the whole IS500 sharing loads of its components with other Lexus models, we haven't even delved into the cost of spare parts and servicing and general maintenance, but just know that owning a Lexus, chances are, is going to be a damn sight more affordable than any of its European competition. However, as I alluded to before, there is a major issue with the exterior of these cars that we need to talk about, specifically if it's an F-Sport model or an IS500 like this, and it's something that is affecting both owners and pedestrians alike. It's the fact that people are developing this thing called TBTL neck. It's basically where the neck muscles spasm from overuse, from turning back to look at it all the time. Really serious issue. However, if you do want to avoid this, before you go buying a brand new BMW, just know that they can cause a thing called VIYM syndrome, which is vomit in your mouth syndrome. It's not as serious as the neck issue, but it's certainly not enjoyable. Seriously though, if you don't think this is one of the sexiest looking cars on the road these days, I've got bad news for you. You've got really shit taste. Look, there are so many design highlights on this thing. The headlight design, gorgeous. The bulge on the bonnet just to fit the V8 engine in, that's just sexy. This rear kind of shoulder contour here into this line, this bit especially, But easily the best highlight for me is that it's one of those cars that you have to know, you know? It's the epitome of cool. To most people, this is just a nice looking Lexus IS. But to those that know, they know it's something very serious. That's cool. But you know what's even cooler? Just lowering it just a smidge and putting on some sexy aftermarket wheels, and they look like this. Oh my God. However, there is one issue with the exterior, and it's the fact that when you're driving it, you can't admire how good it looks. Actually, maybe unless you're driving behind like a tanker truck and you can cop a view of the reflection, but then that means you've got to have a super clean windscreen to see out of it to see your reflection. Actually, we have a solution to this. Simply hit the Wipertech link down below to get 15% off and free express shipping on the only windscreen wiper blades we choose to use. They're so easy to order and fit, and they wipe so well that you'll easily be able to see the reflection of your car anytime there's a reflection anywhere. Or don't do that if you're thinking about lending us your car to feature, because if you do that, we're just going to give you a set of Wipertech blades for free as a thank you present. And if you'd like to volunteer your car, email me via the link down below or message us on the socials. Now inside, what are the issues? Well, you've got to remember, this is a Lexus, so that means it's basically a fancy Toyota. And being a Toyota, that means it might have a pretty underwhelming infotainment system. And right across the IS range, yeah, it does. Look, it's not the worst infotainment system out there, but for a car in the IS segment of the market, it's really frustrating that it doesn't have wireless Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Also, if you're planning on using it via the trackpad, unless like me, you're left-handed in a right-hand drive car, or maybe right-handed in a left-hand drive car, or maybe ambidextrous, this thing can be a real faff to use. Okay, you do get used to it after a while, but even at its best, or when you're using it as a touch screen up here, it simply cannot match BMW's iDrive or a host of infotainment systems in other cars in this class. Actually, one of the updates from 2020 is this larger screen and the fact that you can now touch it and operate it there. However, just know that if you're buying an IS500 here in Australia, a lot of the infotainment system is locked to Japan. We're talking the radio, the sat-nav, it doesn't work here. Now, potentially good news though, apparently there are fixes to this issue, and even across the IS range, we know of owners that have just ditched the entire standard infotainment system and fitted aftermarket gear. They've also upgraded the speakers if it isn't fitted with the Mark Levinson system, and they've fitted extra sound deadening in the car, and apparently all of that makes a huge difference. Actually, you know what? If you're interested in doing any of this sort of stuff, even for your own car, make sure you check out our mates at Automotive Superstore. Even if it's for performance suspension parts or engine components or dash cam or car care products or whatever you need, Automotive Superstore carry over 400,000 different products from over 500 suppliers. And best of all, everything comes with a fitment guarantee and everything is covered by a full manufacturer's warranty. Check them out, the link is down below. But look, back to the common interior complaints with the IS. That's actually about it, honestly. Nothing else really goes wrong in here. Now, this is interesting because when we featured other cars in this class from, let's say, the European manufacturers, they can be guilty of all sorts of electronic gremlins, water leakage issues, bits of trim wearing prematurely, rattles forming all over the place. But in the IS, no. None of those issues. Now look, this might be because this generation of IS has been around since 2013, so you'd like to think any common issues or complaints have been sorted out by now. Or it might just be because Lexus focused really heavily on build quality and reliability. Actually, fun fact for you, did you know that for a Toyota employee to graduate to manufacturing a Lexus, one of the tests that they have to pass is they have to fold an origami cat with their non-dominant hand in under 90 seconds. That's why these things just exude such incredible quality. And you know what? Yeah, you can tell everything you touch in here just feels so premium. Even sort of the weight of the knobs and the way the buttons feel, like the resistance on them, it just feels really, really premium. All the materials, granted, this is an IS500, so it is, you know, the top of the line model, but the Alcantara and the leather, like that's so soft, it feels so, so nice. I love that there's no gloss black plastic to get scratched in a heartbeat. Just, you know, this brushed aluminium finish looks gorgeous. It just, again, I know I keep saying it, but just the sense of quality is outrageous. Actually, here's one for the Mercedes-Benz fans of you. Look, the door handles, they don't squeak, they don't even move. Even in terms of just how resilient these interiors are, as we found in our Lexus ES video, the link for that is down below, owners we spoke to that use those cars for ride sharing, so they're getting hundreds of people in and out of them for long periods of time, these interiors are just so, so resilient, way more resilient than plenty of the competition. And look, okay, design-wise, it's not exactly the last word in modern design. It is aging a little bit, but actually I don't mind it because the ergonomics are so spot on. Everything just falls to your hand really nicely. I love that there are actual tactile buttons for all your aircon controls and stereo stuff and, you know, the main infotainment things there. So that's just easy to use. Then these seats. Seriously, how do they get these seats so perfect? It's like they somehow took my body when I wasn't aware of it and shaped the seat around me, because they almost feel like a fitted Recaro style seat, unbelievably comfortable, but then also totally supportive, and they're heated and ventilated. They don't get any better. Look, overall, this is just such a lovely place to be. Okay, and I'm going to sound like a complete wanker saying this, but this interior kind of reminds me of a classic old school Casio G-Shock watch in the way that it doesn't rely on its just appearance, it relies on just how wonderful it is to use and work with every single day. Nails it. However, the levels of practicality maybe are a little underwhelming. The glove box isn't the largest there. You've got 2 cup holders here, but good luck if you've got a big cup. For small pretentious coffees, like the ones I drink, like a ristretto or a piccolo or a macchiato, they fit quite nicely there. Decent little storage here, that's felt line, but again, not huge. Door bins are okay, but you're gonna struggle to fit a large water bottle in there. Also, it's kind of hard plastic down there, so it's gonna rattle around a bit. This is designed specifically to collect life's filth, and it is because Lexus have designed the interior of it to kind of curve up so it's easy to wipe clean, but there's no storage there, nowhere for your sunglasses, nothing under the seats. So yeah, honestly, average practicality up front. Also, some of the equipment and features, aside from the infotainment system, do leave a little bit to be desired. The rear view camera, it's not very good. It kind of warps the vision out of shape, so you end up relying on the 360 camera, which is fine. Also, there's no wireless charging pad for your phone. That's disappointing. And some people have criticized the fact that it still has a CD player. But here's a fun fact for you. Did you know that over 70% of music sales in Japan are still on physical media as a CD? I found that fascinating. You might laugh and scoff at that, but mark my words, CDs, they're going to come back, okay? I don't have time now to go into why, but mark my words, I said it here first. CDs, it's going to be like the resurgence of vinyl. CDs are coming back. But look, back to the equipment and features in here. Depending on how the original owner spec'd an IS can make a massive difference to your ownership experience. Locally, if you're in the market for a car of a luxury spec, try to find one that has been fitted with the Enhancement 2 pack. If you're looking at an F Sport, that's just the standard enhancement pack. That way you're going to get this phenomenal, and I mean phenomenal, Mark Levinson sound system. You're going to get some extra bits of leather and Alcantara and ventilated front seats. And look, it might cost you maybe an extra $1,000 on the used market, but trust me, it's worth every cent. Now in the back seat, I'm exactly 12 centimeters shorter than former Australian Rugby Union captain and Lexus ambassador John Eales. This is in my driving position, and I can guarantee you one thing, there's no way in hell he would be able to fit back here, because even at my height, I am so cramped. This is a really common complaint for the Lexus IS, is just the lack of rear seat room. I've got to do the full OnlyFans style leg spread to get my legs to fit. My head's constantly rubbing up against the roof. The seats themselves aren't all that comfortable. Like, it makes you kind of feel like you need to be in the fetal position all the time. Not great for rear accommodation. But look, it is important to remember that the IS is substantially smaller than a 3 Series or a C-Class of the same kind of era. In fact, these things share a really similar size footprint to a Honda Civic sedan. So yeah, not great for rear seat room, unfortunately. But look, some positives for the back seat, like the front, just the sense of quality is outrageous. The leather, so soft, Alcantara great. Everything just feels totally premium. Although then you get to the rear features and practicality, which isn't that great. Yeah, you get some air vents back here, but no USB ports at all. You've got some matte pockets. You've got a pull down armrest here with sort of Transformers style cup holders there. But there's, I think, storage under there as well, maybe? No storage under there. No door bins down the side. You wouldn't be able to get to them anyway. These little spots collect, again, more life's filth. It's not great back here, honestly. Also, I really feel for anyone sitting in the middle of the back seat, because the transmission tunnel is enormous. I don't know where their legs are going to go. And then in the boot, look, size-wise, it's okay. It's about average for this class of car. Although the opening aperture, like this gap from here to here, isn't real huge, so you don't want anything too large. You can put the seats down, but you can't do it via levers sort of here or a button. You've actually got to do it from the rear seat, and that's just annoying. You know the other thing that's really annoying? It's the fact that you might not be getting as much free stuff as you deserve. What we mean by that is that we worked out that of everybody that watches our videos, about 75% of you haven't subscribed to ReDriven. But if you just hit that subscribe button, it means that we can make more free things for you, and hopefully YouTube will learn that you want to see more of our stuff for free. Plus, for even more ReDriven perks, why not consider becoming a member? The link for that is down below. Actually, it's right near the link that will take you to redriven.com and show you the free Lexus IS cheat sheet. We've listed out all the common problems and everything you're going to need to know if you're in the market for one of these bad boys. But are there any complaints about the driving experience? Unfortunately, yes, there are. The thing is though, we think it has less to do with the car and more to do with what you might want the car to actually be. The complaints mainly revolve around the steering being a bit too light and the gearbox or the shifts being too slow. And look, yeah, even when it's in its sportiest settings, it is nowhere near as fast as a lot of the dual clutch units out there, or even some of the modern automatics like the 10-speed auto in the LC500. But you know what? I don't actually think it's that big of a negative, and it's nowhere near as bad as the internet might make out, especially if you just embrace what this car is actually about. See, Lexus made it abundantly clear right from the start that this car was never intended to go head-to-head against a bunch of other performance cars. They weren't trying to impress you with acceleration times or lap records anywhere. And you know what? Thank God, because quite often when a car is calibrated to do those things, it can mean massive compromises are made in just the everyday enjoyment of it. The goal of the IS500 was just to focus on the emotional responses of the driver and just make it the best overall driving experience possible all of the time. And I tell you what, they have nailed it. And look, if you're concerned that an Audi S4 or a AMG C43 or a BMW M340i are going to be quicker than this thing, like, that's fine. This just isn't the car for you. It sounds like you're somebody that gets more of a thrill from a car lighting up a spreadsheet or maybe winning at roll racing, and that's fine. That's a totally valid way to enjoy a car. But just know, there are countless other cars out there that will leave this thing for dead in terms of performance, but most of them simply cannot match this thing for feeling of soul and character and just honestly driving enjoyment all the time. And remember, like, a regular IS is such a cohesive package to drive. It just does all the normal everyday stuff so well. And then the IS350 F Sport, let's be honest, that's honestly about all the performance you'll ever need in the real world. But then with this honestly utterly glorious 5-litre V8 under the bonnet, it just adds the perfect dose of theatre and spice just to the way it does everything. And listen to it. Yes. Look, I'll be honest with you, overall, this thing has provided me with easily one of the most enjoyable driving experiences I've ever had. You know what it is? It's all the best bits of precision Japanese engineering and build quality, but with the heart and soul of like an old school muscle car. That's got to be the perfect recipe, right? And also, you might disagree with me here, but does anything sound and feel better than a Japanese V8? Or is there something better than these engines? Are the 4 engines in these as reliable as we're led to believe? Unfortunately, I can't answer that question because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But you know who is? It's Jim.
I'll kick things off with the 2-litre turbo. Look, this is part of Toyota's new-ish generations of engines. They are more complex than older engines, so it's possible in the future they might have some issues, but so far they are proving to be pretty reliable. They are turboed, so there is more to go wrong. And I would say they're probably less tolerant of being neglected like some other Toyota engines. So my pro tip here is just keep on top of the services, do it every 10,000 kilometres without fail. As for the 2.5-litre hybrid, it is proving to be actually more reliable than the 2-litre turbo because there's just less to go wrong. There's no turbos, there's less emissions related stuff. So yeah, less to go wrong. They're not perfect though. There are reports of the EGR valve and cooler having their own separate issues. The cooler has been known to leak and get clogged. The EGR valve occasionally can get stuck open and make the car run terribly. Just be careful if you're trying to diagnose one of these because it's running terribly. I've seen guys overlook that and sort of get stuck. Check the EGR valve, make sure it's not stuck open. There are some reports of high pressure fuel pump complications and some reports of leaks as well, but not what you'd call common. Now, the battery and the hybrid system in these proving to be very reliable. One thing you've got to look out for though is just make sure that the filter for the cooling fan is kept clean. If that filter gets dirty, it restricts flow to the fan and to the battery can overheat, and that's when you will start having issues. They don't like heat. Now, if something should go wrong with the battery, they are actually quite easy to replace. You don't need to go to the dealership. There are some very affordable and more convenient ways to get the batteries replaced in these. The hybrids have the eCVT transmission. You're extremely unlikely to have any issues with that. I'll wager that it's probably one of the most, actually I'm going to say it is the most reliable CVT you can get at the moment. The V6 engines, look, a version of this engine has been around for years. They've evolved and they're better than they used to be. They are very reliable. One of the problems you might see is with the water pump. They have a relatively higher failure rate than some of the other engines. Not terribly common though. It just can leak. If you're going to do the water pump, my tip is do the thermostat at the same time because they have been known to get stuck open in these. That just makes the car run cool. It might still drive okay, but long term it is very bad for the engine and it will log a fault code if it is running cold. There are a few isolated cases of high pressure fuel pump issues here, absolutely not what you'd call common though. One of the common issues you might see though is from the purge valve. It just basically controls the flow of fuel vapor from the fuel tank. They can get stuck open or closed, and quite often when that does happen, you'll log a fault code, so you'll get a check engine light. Pretty easy fix, that one. Now, the one you're all waiting for, the V8. There's really not that much for me to say here. These V8s are arguably one of the most reliable modern V8s you can get. They're not perfect though. One of the issues they have occasionally is the cooling system. There's a cover plate down inside the valley, a bunch of pipes going in and out of it. They can leak. Now, if they leak, it's a bit of a pain because you've got to pull the entire inlet manifold off, and it's fairly complicated. It is quite labor intensive, so if you're paying someone to do it, which you probably should, it's probably going to be a bit expensive. And while they're in there with the cooling system drained, get the water pump done at the same time, because that actually is the next weakest link with these engines. Not terribly common, but it is something that does occur. With these engines, some owners have complained about moderate oil consumption. My tip here is make sure the services are on time, get it done every 10,000 Ks, and you're less likely to see that problem. One thing worth mentioning, the earlier versions of this engine, 2016-ish in the ISF, they did have a few issues with their timing chain tensioners. One of them would wear prematurely, but in the IS500 engines, never a problem. It just shows really they have evolved, and the timing chains in these, unlike their European counterparts, are absolutely reliable. And speaking of European V8s, yes, some of them might make more power, but overall, in terms of reliability, this engine wins every time. And you know what they say, if you want to finish first you must finish. The transmissions in these, they are actually very reliable. Some owners complain about that they're too slow to shift. That is actually part of a heat and wear management strategy so the gearboxes don't kill themselves. So if you had to choose between a gearbox that has snappy shifting and poor reliability and one that shifts slightly slower and lasts forever, I know which one I'd take. But look, the biggest issue you might come across with a car like this is actually just keeping a license.
Okay, so do we think you should buy one? Let's start with the locally delivered models first. Yes, you should buy one. Short of the limited rear legroom and maybe the slight lack of current tech, we're not actually sure why you'd buy any other car in this class. The IS is superior in terms of build quality, reliability, it retains its value better than the competition. Chances are it will be more affordable to maintain it as well. And look, yeah, sure, maybe the whole image bullshit and marketing hype of some of the European brands might be more appealing than owning a Lexus, but come on, you're better than that. But what about an IS500? Should you buy one of these? Are you actually asking me that? Yeah, of course you should, you silly sausage. The IS500 is an incredibly special car, and most likely the last of its breed. The chances of another practical four-door sedan packing a naturally aspirated 5-litre V8, sending power to the rear wheels, and exhibiting arguably the automotive world's highest levels of build quality, fit and finish, and reliability are honestly slim to none. And look, okay, yeah, it's not perfect, but let's be honest, perfect would just be boring. And the little areas that it might be a touch underwhelming are instantly forgiven the moment you go for a drive. Please, if you can afford one of these, you just have to do it. But if you do need more legroom, maybe one of these instead. We do need to say a massive thank you to the crew at Lexus at Chatswood. And if you want to buy this car or one of these in general, talk to Rick there, he's an absolute legend. But if you already own an IS of this iteration, can you let us know in the comments below what your ownership experience has been like? That way, anyone researching the car has even more information to draw from.